Anne Rice's way of um of talking about these characters, these vampires, is so human. It's so felt. It's like very, very deeply felt. It's all about like the kind of sensations of, I guess, being a human that like struggles with themselves or like asks questions about themselves and their sort of footprint on the world around them. That I just really found really striking and really beautiful.
Hi, I'm Jared Alexander with the Grio. How you doing?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. I'm honestly so excited to talk to you. I am obsessed with the show. I've been devouring it, so I'm of course super excited for this weekend.
Thank you. I'm so glad.
Yeah. When I knew it was coming out, I actually, funny enough, Interview with the Vampire has been on my shelf for a really long time. But I dived into it and I actually read the book last month, kind of right around when the show premiered.
Mhm.
Um, and there are some big differences, in particular with your character and Louis' backstory. So talk to me a little bit about, of course, like your initial interactions with the material, if you knew a lot about it, and what your thoughts were with this adaptation, because I'm honestly just obsessed with the direction you guys are taking it in.
Well, my first interaction, I guess, with the material was watching the film when I was a teenager. But I think I didn't quite, and maybe it's because it's like partly a a condition of like just being a teenager and not having sort of language for everything and not sort of engaging with material in a very nuanced way. But I think I kind of watched and that's I don't say that either to like undermine uh teenagers because it's a hard time. It's a difficult time. Um, but uh, but yeah, I think I just kind of saw it as like it was a fun vampire film. Um, and then when the pilot came into my inbox, that was I sort of had like a obviously a passing familiarity because of the film, but not
Mm.
really. I didn't really know sort of what it was as like a whole thing. I wasn't familiar with the books. Um, and I just had this really overwhelming feeling of like I felt almost like confronted by it. Like I felt like, oh, this feels like it's kind of tapping into something really familiar to me. And I had to put it down for a bit. Like I just had to stop reading it because I just felt a little bit like, oh, this is I'm feeling something like in my chest and I'm not really
Yeah.
sure what that feeling is yet. So I just need to like take a second and then like go back to it in a minute. And I did, and it just like it's the best script I've ever read. That pilot episode is incredible. And there's things, there's things that we had to lose from it as well. And I still think like the kind of the the revised version of it is also brilliant. And then I went and read the books, and I read the first two books. Um, and yeah, I just think like it gets into something. I think Anne Rice's way of um of talking about these characters, these vampires, is so human and it's so like it's so felt. It's like very, very deeply felt. It's all about like the kind of sensations of, I guess, being a human that like struggles with themselves or asks questions about themselves and their sort of footprint on the world around them. Uh, that I just really found really striking and really beautiful, and the language is so beautiful as well. Um, and it's just incredibly dark as well, which like of course you're gonna get into when you're thinking about these things and talking about these things. But yeah, obviously I was like, okay, yeah, this is a departure from like for me, it was like reading in the pilot, I was like, oh, this is a departure from Brad Pitt. I can't imagine Brad Pitt playing this guy, but I only had like a sort of vague memory of like as a teenager, I knew that like Dandiwe Newton's character was a slave and
Mm.
feeling kind of uncomfortable with that dynamic, very uncomfortable with that dynamic. But apart from that, I kind of didn't really have a sense of like that he was a plantation owner and that he, um, so yeah, that was also it's really refreshing, like now I think, to read something that is like color conscious,
Mhm.
rather than it being like colorblind casting. I think there's definitely a place for that. There's a place for like, particularly in fantasy, that it's like visually representative of the world we live in now. And you don't have to get into, if you don't want to, you don't have to explore, racism, or like a greater context of like what it means to be a person of color in
Mhm.
today's world. But when something does, it's really special and rare. It's like a gem.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and I listen, like I said, I just with everything you just said, you're right. I think Anne Rice's the language is when I was reading it, I was telling my friends, I was like, this is like the most hypnotic, mesmerizing book I think I've read. Like you just are in, and it's just the interview, right? But it's just you
Mm.
feel you're there, you feel everything. But going into reading the book, knowing from the promo materials and stuff what I had seen, I was like, okay, like it felt to me like it was like a colorblind decision, let's say. Like, oh, we're gonna cast a person of color for this character. But then reading it, of course, I was like, how is that going to
How
work
does that work?
with the owner? Because of course, as a black person reading that book, there were moments that just kind of took me out of it because I was like, oh wow, that's a lot. So it was so refreshing again when I got to see it, even just in the pilot alone. Like, and what I find interesting too is that the character does feel the same though, because you're
Mm.
in your character's head in the book. So in a lot of ways, the way he longs and looks at the world and feels very hard, like he feels a lot, that's still there. Um, but those tweaks to his life and in New Orleans and exactly who he is, and as a black man, as a black queer person,
Mm.
uh, I feel like it like just like it spread the source material out even more. You know what I mean? It's still faithful in a way, but like kind of spread the edges of it around. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and it kind of like it comes to very similar conclusions, but I think it almost like not to it's all it's all relative, like how people sort of reflect on their own existence and their own sense of guilt and grief, or whatever it is. But like I think that, yeah, there was something very true to me about uh those feelings of like helplessness and powerlessness, and what that can drive you to. It just felt like almost like an even more truthful conclusion, you know,
Yeah.
um, particularly as it pertains to like his power as a vampire doesn't buy him out of his the perception that other people have of him as a black man.
Absolutely. And again, I find that even changes the conflict between you and Lestat because in the book there's so much there and how they see the world, but
Mm.
they're both white men, so it is so different adding that layer to it where it's like even with this supernatural gift or ability, you still are facing challenges and the decisions that you make impact people and the community at large in ways that it just won't impact for Lestat. And talk to me a little bit too, just about, I imagine it's a lot because you guys, there's so much going on, but is it super fun? I mean, there's so much blood. You guys are levitating. You guys, there's like so much happening.
Yeah.
Talking about like just the technical elements of shooting a show like this that I think is nice too, because it seems to me like there's a lot of practical elements to it. I feel like we have a lot of CGI these days, but I kind of really like how practical a lot of it feels.
Yeah, most of the things in the show are practical. Really, the only sort of big bit of CGI in the whole thing is the end of episode 5, the kind of flying and dropping sequence. But yeah, we're doing a lot of it for real.
Mm-hmm.
But like to your point about like it being a lot, it was, and sometimes it was like, I think I realized when we finished, like there were things that were getting to me that I didn't even know were getting to me. They were like, that were kind of like setting their roots in my brain, or like in my, just things about Louis, both things that that I feel connected to and things that are different, that like really got into me. But it was a lot of fun. Like every day was a lot of fun. It was never a normal day. For one, it's night, like you're doing everything at night, and for two,
Yeah.
it's like there was with the practical elements of the show, like you are doing something unusual every day. There is a point in every day where you're like, oh, I'm like sitting, like this is just an example of something that I was like, this is something almost imperceptible in the show, but like in the making of it, like when Louis is carrying Claudia from the burning rooming house, like he is obviously very strong and he's running with her. So they had me sit on a dolly and the camera is Claudia and and the grip is holding the dolly and like sprinting down the backlot and I'm sitting on the dolly and like that and carrying the camera and like I was I was carrying the camera up the stairs and just things like that. You're just like, oh, this is really fun. This is like this tiny moment is a big moment in the story, but it's like a tiny moment in minutes that there's all of this kind of uh these exciting filmmaking techniques that we were doing, and we had like 2 city blocks to play with as a backlot. Like that to me that's what I always imagined storytelling would be when I was a kid. I used to watch behind the scenes on DVDs and stuff and be like, oh, it'd be so cool to do that one day. And yeah, it's
And listen, it totally paid off. I mean, that Claudia episode, it does literally feel like you're Claudia while you're running. So it totally works. Like that was so cool. And talk to you a little bit. I mean, you just mentioned it too, but how was it to be in New Orleans and shoot this? I mean, again, the book touches on this for sure in the first chunk when you're in it culturally, but of course with the show and it being set and rooted in this Black family, I just find it so rich and lush. So how was it to be able to kind of shoot there and kind of be around that, and talk to me a little bit about your interaction with maybe the people who live there, stuff like that?
It's like I love New Orleans. I have like I have this weird sort of I feel like I landed in New Orleans, got off the plane, got in a car, and was like, I feel very comfortable here. And I don't know what it is. Like people kept saying to me, like, you'll get there and you'll feel like this energy and you won't really be able to explain it. But I thought that was going to be specifically related to like, the things that people normally talk about with New Orleans, like, like voodoo and, the sort of mystical and magical elements of the place. But it really reminded me of home. Like I'm from a place called Bristol, which is like there is a large Black community there. It is a port town, so like it played a big part in slavery. So slavery is kind of everywhere. It's in the names of the streets, in the names of the buildings. There are statues to, commemorating awful men, and and so I kind of understand what it is to like grow up in a place like that. And New Orleans, but it's also saying that it's also a place that now is rooted in culture and art and a kind of like not to sound too like highfalutin, but just like a real there's a real like want to express yourself and to make things and to tell your story and to like there's a big musical culture in Bristol as well and like graffiti culture, like Banksy's from Bristol and Massive Attack and Tricky and like artistically I feel like it has something it has something in common with New Orleans. So like when I got there I felt just comfortable. Like I felt like I belonged there, even though I'm like, I'd never been there before. I'm British. And yeah, just like I'm like, I'm loath to ever say about a place like the people are really great because it's so general. Everyone's probably not great and loads of people are great, but like the people that I interacted with, I just really I felt like a real affinity with the place and I miss it. Right, like I really miss it regularly. I lived there for 5 months and I'm looking forward to going back at some point,
Yeah. Absolutely. Listen, it looks lush and awesome the way you guys shoot it there. And again, it's wrapped up in this culture that certainly was missing, I think, from reading the book.
Mm,
Just to kind of wrap up a little bit, sort of my last questions. I know that, you know, the book is one story, but there's like such an extended, I mean, she wrote so much about these characters from different perspectives and everything. But what do you hope for with the future of the show? It's awesome for me personally. Like, I feel like my timeline, people are talking about the show and are so excited. But what do you want kind of for your character? Who I think it's so interesting. You know, you have a character who technically, I guess, isn't human anymore from the start
mm.
of the story it's about. But it's a very human story, and you almost find out or dive into humanity even more by looking at someone who was stripped of that. So talk to
Mm.
me a little bit about where you hope the character goes from here.
I mean, quite literally, like I want him to have therapy or like to engage in therapeutic thinking. Like I I would love for Louis to not put all of his stock in his romantic relationships, as important as they are. I want him to like really find I want him to really connect to who he is. I think like so much of his like his torment is about the fact that he never was given or never gave himself the opportunity to sort of um reconcile with the truth about himself. He was always like trying to be somebody else. He was always having to perform and kind of code switch between these different parts of society that he had to be a part of every day. And I would love for him to like find what makes him happy, like what he can do for himself that makes him happy. That's what I really want. And that might not make for like kind of dramatic storytelling, and maybe nobody else wants to see that. But for me, as somebody that loves him, I'm
Yeah.
like, and he finds a version of that in the books, you know, like he goes back to New Orleans, he has this house and he sits in his garden and he does gardening at night and he reads his books. And like
Yeah.
I would love that for him, as sort of undynamic and dramatic as that might be
Yeah.
dramaturgically. I want that for him.
I want that for him too. When the interview's done and he can just, you know, be sitting with his therapist every Wednesday,
Yeah.
just break it down all that's happened to him.
Yeah.
I would love that.
And
Well,
then
thank
maybe I think Louis would be a great vampire therapist. I think
you.
like I think eventually he could train and become a therapist for other vampires and work
Right.
through some of this trauma.
Yeah. I mean, he's around all these tortured people all the time, so he definitely will be able to kind of help them through, you know,
Yeah.
that whole transition. Well, thank you so much. Seriously, this has been so great. Again, it was like the show has just been on the top of my list all year. It's been really fun to cover, and it's fun to engage with my friends about it. And I'm so happy with just what it is. It makes you really excited about like what an adaptation can be, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, and it feels like the books, right? Like well, I feel like that anyway. I'm like the feeling is all there. It's
Right.
you know,
That's
yeah.
exactly. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. Congrats. Nice to meet you.
Lovely to meet you. Thank you.